a small town wrapped in snow, and a little girl standing alone on a cold dirt yard, shivering, scared, and clutching a broken teddy bear as if it were the last piece of her world. No one opened their doors, no one stepped forward, until a police cruiser turned the corner, and a German shepherd leaped out before the engine even stopped. What happened next would uncover a hidden crime, awaken a community, and build a home where broken hearts could finally rest. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from today? Drop a comment below. Your message might warm someone's day more than you think. Wishing you a peaceful, gentle, and blessed day ahead. Winter had come early to Redwood Falls, a small Oregon town tucked between brooding mountains and an evergreen forest that rustled like an old hymn. The sky that morning was the color of cold steel, heavy with the promise of snow that didn't quite have the courage to fall. Houses along Ashen Road stood shoulder to shoulder, their chimneys puffing faint ribbons of smoke, their windows dim with the kind of quiet secrets only small towns know how to hold. Wind pushed through the street with the low sigh of something that had seen too much sorrow too many times. It carried the smell of pine needles, wet earth, and the faintest trace of burnt cedar from someone's fireplace. At the far end of the cul-de-sac stood a weathered blue house, its paint peeled in thin strips like tired skin, and its porch sagged slightly as if exhausted from years of bearing witness to arguments, slammed doors, and a silence that felt more violent than shouting. In the center of the yard, on the cold dirt where grass once tried and failed to grow, stood a small girl, 6-year-old Lily Harland. Lily was painfully small for her age, with narrow shoulders, thin arms, and dark brown hair that fell in tangled waves to her elbows. Her face was shaped softly, round with innocence, but her cinnamon-colored eyes carried shadows far too old for a child, shadows carved by grief, fear, and nights spent trying to understand why the world kept taking people away from her. Her father, Mark Harland, had died only that morning after a sudden collapse that doctors called complications. Her mother had died a year earlier in a car crash that the town whispered about, but never questioned out loud. Lily held a frayed teddy bear pressed tightly to her chest. Its patchy fur and lopsided button eye were the last remnants of a family that kept slipping through her fingers. Beside her towered Marcy Harland, Lily's stepmother of 2 years, a woman in her late 30s, tall and angular, with sharp cheekbones and cold blue eyes that never softened unless someone important was watching. Marcy dressed in a fitted black coat, but grief did not sit naturally on her. It clung awkwardly to her, as if borrowed from someone else. Her lips, naturally thin and perpetually pursed, curved into a pinched frown as she stared at Lily like she were a troublesome stain that needed scrubbing. Marcy had once been a waitress until a series of bitter disappointments, the death of her own mother, a long line of broken relationships, and years struggling financially, hardened her into a woman who believed the world owed her compensation for her suffering. Next to her stood Cole Weaver, Marcy's boyfriend, a man in his early 40s with the kind of bulk that came from laziness rather than strength. He had greasy blonde hair tied into a weak ponytail, a faint stubble, and a permanent sneer carved into his lips. Cole's eyes were small, watery, always scanning for weakness in others. He dressed in a tattered leather jacket and boots with cracked soles. His past was littered with small crimes, tempers lost, and a reputation for enjoying control over those smaller than himself. The funeral had merely annoyed him. He had shown no sorrow, only impatience to return home. The wooden gate creaked under Cole's push as he dragged Lily into the yard. The girl stumbled over a rock, nearly falling, but he yanked her upright with a cold grunt. Marcy followed, carrying a metal bucket filled with icy water drawn from the backyard spigot. "This is how we wash off bad luck," Marcy hissed. Her voice cracked like brittle glass. "Funerals attract spirits. I won't have them haunting my house." Lily shook her head, tears forming but refusing to fall. I didn't bring anything bad," she whispered, her small voice barely audible against the wind. Cole gave a laugh so sharp it almost cut the air. "Kid, you've been nothing but bad luck since the day you were born." Marcy lifted the bucket. Water sloshed violently. Without hesitation, she threw the freezing contents onto the small girl. The icy shock knocked the breath out of Lily's lungs. Her hair clung to her face, her dress soaked instantly, her teeth chattering uncontrollably. The teddy bear slipped from her arms and fell face first into the mud. From behind closed blinds, the neighbors watched. Mrs. Redwell, a retired nurse with trembling hands. Mr. Keaton, an elderly veteran who walked with a cane. And Shauna Parks, a mother of two who pressed her children away from the window. They saw everything. They did nothing. Fear, reputation, and the quiet politics of small towns bound their hands. Then a sound broke through the cold, the low growl of an engine approaching fast. A white police cruiser swung into the cul-de-sac, tires crunching over frost. The engine cut off. The door opened. Officer Daniel Holt, 38, stepped out. Daniel was broad-shouldered, tall, and sturdy in the way that gave people comfort without him needing to say a word. His face carried rugged edges softened by warm brown eyes. He wore the standard Navy patrol uniform of Redwood Falls PD, but the worn stitching at his cuffs suggested he worked more than he rested. His hair, dark and slightly tousled, was peppered with early streaks of gray that spoke of long nights and the weight of responsibility. Daniel had served as a sheriff's deputy for years before transferring to the quieter Redwood Falls precinct, hoping to leave behind the horrors of a hostage case that had gone wrong, one that still haunted his sleep. Beside him leaped down Ranger, his 3-year-old German Shepherd K9 partner. Ranger was a powerful dog with thick black and tan fur, alert amber eyes, and an intelligence that radiated through every movement. His ears stood upright as if constantly listening for danger. Ranger had been rescued by Daniel as a pup from an illegal breeding shed, and their bond was so strong it felt almost like shared heartbeat. Ranger's loyalty was matched only by his gentleness with children, something Daniel never taught him but admired deeply. Ranger froze, tail lowering, eyes focusing sharply on the soaked girl. His posture stiffened in defensive instinct. Daniel's voice cut through the yard with calm authority. "Ma'am, sir, step away from the child." Marcy stiffened. "Officer Holt, this is family business." "There is no family business that involves dumping freezing water on a minor," Daniel replied, stepping forward. His tone held a quiet heat that had made grown men reconsider their choices. Ranger positioned himself between Lily and the adults, emitting a deep growl, not aggressive, but undeniably protective. Cole scoffed. "Mind your damn business, Holt." Daniel's jaw tightened. "It became my business the moment you endangered a child." Lily lifted her eyes to him, terrified, shivering, and clinging to nothing but air now that her teddy lay in the mud. She whispered one small question that cracked Daniel's heart cleanly in half. "Am I in trouble, sir?" "No," Daniel said softly, kneeling down to her height. "You're safe now?" Ranger gently pressed his warm body against Lily's side, shielding her from the wind. She reached out a trembling hand and touched his fur. Ranger licked her knuckles, easing a sob from her lips. Daniel stood, his eyes burning into Marcy and Cole. "I'll ask this formally. Did either of you harm this child?" Marcy scoffed. "She's dramatic, just trying to get attention." Cole muttered, "Brat needs discipline." Daniel shook his head. "I'm placing the child under emergency protective custody." Marcy lunged forward. "You can't do that!" Ranger bared his teeth, not lunging, not snapping, just warning. Marcy froze. Daniel wrapped Lily in a fleece blanket from his cruiser, picked up the muddy teddy bear, and guided her gently to the back seat. Ranger jumped in beside her. As Daniel closed the door, the wind carried a promise of snow. The town watched silently. And somewhere deep inside Daniel's memory, another file stirred. The suspicious crash that took Lily's mother a year earlier. A case he had never fully understood. He looked back once at Marcy and Cole. As something told him this was only the beginning. The road toward Officer Daniel Holt's cabin wound through the dense Oregon forest like a thread of silver pulled through dark cloth. The cruiser's headlights sliced open narrow tunnels of visibility, illuminating branches drooping with early frost. The air outside was brittle enough to crack, and the sky had deepened to a blue so dark it bordered on black. Lily Harlan sat in the back seat wrapped in Daniel's fleece blanket, her small frame curled around her soaked teddy bear. Beside her, Ranger rested with watchful stillness, the German shepherd's warm breath fogging a faint patch against the window. Daniel kept one hand on the wheel, the other occasionally tapping the dashboard in a subtle rhythm, nervousness he rarely allowed to surface. He glanced into the rearview mirror. Lily's dark hair clung to her cheeks, her eyes half closed, exhaustion pulling her downward like a tide. Ranger nudged her gently from time to time, as if reminding her she was no longer alone. When they reached the cabin, Daniel stepped out first, scanning the perimeter. Habit, instinct, and the lingering echo of the strange flashlight he noticed earlier at the Harlan house sharpened his senses. The cabin stood sturdy and quiet, built from old pine logs the color of worn honey, its porch light glowing warmly against the dark. Smoke curled from the chimney. Daniel always left the fire low burning for Ranger on cold days. He opened the back door and lifted Lily. She was feather-light, her body tense as if expecting pain even in safety. Ranger walked ahead, tail low, ears swiveling with alert professionalism. Inside the cabin, warmth welcomed them. Thick rugs, soft lamplight, shelves filled with old detective novels and dog gear, and a faint scent of cedar wood from the burning logs in the fireplace. Daniel set Lily down on a cushioned armchair near the fire. She sat upright, unsure whether she was allowed to sink into comfort. "You're safe here, Lily," he said gently. Ranger circled before lying down beside the chair, his chin resting on her knee. She stroked his fur hesitantly at first, then with quiet relief. Daniel crouched beside her. "Do you hurt anywhere?" She shook her head, but her eyes betrayed a few hidden aches. "Are you hungry?" "A little," she whispered. Daniel heated a pot of chicken noodle soup on the stove. As he cooked, the front door opened softly. A woman stepped inside, Deputy Sarah Maddox, 33 years old. Sarah was tall and athletic with a lean runner's build. Her dark brown skin seemed to glow in the firelight, and her black curly hair was tied up in a practical bun. She wore the same Navy uniform as Daniel, though hers looked newer. She took meticulous care of her gear. Sarah had a calm but serious demeanor formed by a childhood spent caring for younger siblings, while her single father worked double shifts. Responsibility had settled in her bones early, making her both fiercely protective and quietly compassionate. She removed her gloves and nodded at Daniel. "I came as soon as you called. Is this the girl?" Daniel motioned for quiet. "Her name is Lily. She's been through hell." Sarah's eyes softened. She stepped closer, kneeling at a respectful distance from the child. "Hi there, sweetheart. I'm Sarah. You're in a safe place now. No one here is going to hurt you." Lily's fingers tightened around Ranger's fur. She didn't speak, but she didn't look away. A small victory. Daniel served the soup, and Lily ate in slow, cautious bites, as if each spoonful might be taken from her. Sarah removed her jacket and hung it by the door, her expression shifting from gentle to serious as she pulled Daniel aside. "What happened?" she whispered. Daniel recounted the scene, the bucket of icy water, Lily shivering in the cold dirt, Marcy and Cole unmoved, Sarah's jaw clenched tightly. "We've had complaints about Cole before. Noise, threats, drinking, nothing that stuck." "Now it will," Daniel muttered. Sarah nodded. "Child Protective Services? I'll call first thing in the morning. Tonight she stays here." As Daniel walked back toward Lily, he noticed her teddy bear had torn further during the ride. A frayed seam along the ear gaped open. Something metallic glinted inside. "Lily," Daniel said softly, "may I take a look at your bear?" She clutched it tight for a second, then slowly nodded. He reached into the seam and pulled out a tiny USB drive, slender, silver, no larger than a house key. Ranger's ears perked. Sarah stepped closer, her brows knit. Daniel asked, "Lily, did your dad ever tell you about something hidden in your bear?" The child shook her head. "Daddy just said, 'This bear protects secrets.'" Daniel exchanged a look with Sarah, one heavy with possibility and dread. He plugged the USB into his old laptop. Ranger stood against Daniel's leg, tense. A single audio file appeared. Daniel clicked play. A man's voice, tired, breathless, filled the cabin. "Marcy, what is in this medicine? My chest. It's hurting. I don't need this, Cole. You said—" Then Marcy's whisper, "Don't argue. Let him drink it. All of it." Sarah's face drained of color. Lily covered her ears, trembling. Ranger pushed his head into her lap, grounding her. Daniel stopped the audio immediately, closing the laptop with a shaking hand. He knelt beside Lily. "Sweetheart," he said softly, "your father didn't leave you alone. He left you the truth." Lily's voice cracked. They hurt Daddy?" Daniel didn't lie. "It looks that way, but you're safe now." Sarah exhaled shakily. "If this recording is authentic, it's attempted homicide at minimum." Daniel nodded grimly. "And it means Marcy and Cole realized she still had something that could expose them." A knock suddenly rattled the door. Ranger sprang to his feet, barking sharply. Daniel motioned for silence, hand on his holster. Sarah slipped beside the window, peering through a small gap in the curtain. A man stood on the porch, thin, shivering, holding his coat tight. Daniel recognized him. Ned Callahan, a part-time mechanic in his late 50s. Ned had a gaunt face, gray stubble, and trembling hands stained perpetually with oil. He was gentle by nature, a man who loved fixing things because it was the only way he felt in control. But his life had been marked by tragedy. A fire 2 decades ago took his wife and daughter, leaving him soft-spoken, haunted, and prone to helping others almost excessively, as if trying to make amends to ghosts. Daniel opened the door just enough to speak. "Ned, what are you doing here?" Ned glanced around nervously. I saw Cole's truck parked down the road a while ago. Headlights off. He looked angry, pacing. Figured you should know." Daniel's stomach tightened. "How long ago?" 15 minutes, maybe less." Sarah cursed under her breath. Ranger growled low, sensing tension. Ned continued. "Thought I should warn you. Didn't want trouble coming to your doorstep." His eyes flicked toward Lily, understanding without being told. "Thank you," Daniel said sincerely. "Go home. Lock your doors." When Ned left, Daniel secured the cabin windows and reset the alarm system. Sarah checked her service weapon and positioned herself near the back door. Lily watched all of it with scared eyes. Daniel sat next to her again. "You're safe," he assured her. "We're here. Ranger's here." Ranger rested his head gently on Lily's lap, and for the first time, the girl managed a tiny, fragile smile. Deep outside the cabin, hidden among the trees, the forest shifted. A quiet reminder that darkness was waiting. But so was the light. Tonight belonged to safety. Tomorrow would begin the search for truth. Morning crept over Redwood Falls, with the faint glow of pale gold slipping between towering pines. A hush blanketed the forest, an early-hour stillness that felt protective somehow, as if the land itself held its breath after last night's tensions. Inside Daniel Holt's cabin, the fireplace had dimmed to amber embers, but warmth still clung to the air. Ranger lifted his head first, ears twitching toward the window, eyes sharpening as sunlight brushed the glass. Daniel had slept in the armchair beside Lily's makeshift bed on the couch, his badge tucked safely on the table beside him. His face, usually calm and commanding, now appeared worn at the edges, dark circles under his eyes, stubble roughening his jaw, muscles tight from sleeping in an upright position. He woke before his alarm, habit more than rest pushing him upright. His first glance was toward Lily. She slept curled around Ranger's flank, her small hand gripping his fur the way a ship might cling to an anchor. The German Shepherd remained perfectly still, guarding her as if the slightest shift might wake her fears. Daniel allowed a faint smile. Sarah Maddox, who had taken the night watch, sat near the back door sipping black coffee from a chipped mug. The woman looked exhausted but resolute, her strong posture curved slightly forward as though she were always listening for danger. The shadows beneath her eyes told of another sleepless night, but the steadiness in her gaze never wavered. "You should have slept in the bedroom," Daniel murmured. Sarah shrugged. "Your couch is softer than the back seat of my cruiser. It's practically a luxury." Daniel smirked softly. "You okay?" Sarah's jaw tightened. "If that recording is real, this is bigger than we thought. We might be sitting on an attempted murder investigation. Maybe 2. Her voice lowered. "And if Cole was outside last night, he's desperate." Before Daniel could respond, Ranger rose and padded quietly to the door, nose pressed to the crack beneath it. A soft growl rumbled from his chest, not threat, but alert. Daniel stood and approached the window. A figure was trudging up the gravel path toward the cabin. He tensed, but Sarah placed a hand on her holster, ready. The figure resolved into an older woman, bundled in a thick quilted coat, hair tied in a loose bun. Daniel recognized her at once. Mrs. Gail Whitmore, the widow who lived across from the Harlans. She knocked gently, her gloved hands trembling slightly. Daniel opened the door. "Mrs. Whitmore, you shouldn't be out this early. Is everything okay?" Her eyes, soft gray marbled with worry, flicked into the cabin, settling on Lily. Her voice quivered. "I heard shouting last night. Saw headlights. I wanted to check if the child was safe." Daniel stepped aside. "You can come in." Gail Whitmore was in her early 70s, with a gentle presence shaped by decades as an elementary school teacher. Her posture had a slight stoop, but her mind remained sharp. She had spent her life protecting children with a fierceness that contrasted her frail appearance. Losing her only son in a logging accident 10 years ago had deepened her empathy into something more like a vow. She would never ignore a child in danger again. She approached Lily's sleeping form, her voice soft as linen. "Poor dear. She reminds me of my granddaughter." Daniel motioned Gail toward the table. "We need your statement formally today." Gail nodded. "I'll say what I saw. Nothing more, nothing less." Sarah glanced at Daniel. "Then Jonas is our next stop." Lily stirred, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Ranger immediately sat upright beside her. The girl blinked around the room before her gaze landed on Daniel. Relief softened her features. "Morning, sweetheart." Daniel crouched beside her. "We're going to take you somewhere safe today. Miss Gale is here to help too." Lily nodded shyly. "Did the bad people follow us?" Daniel shook his head gently. "Not anymore." Sarah picked up her gear, sliding on her uniform jacket. "We should head out before breakfast, less chance of drawing attention." Just as they prepared to leave, a loud engine rumbled outside, deep, throaty, approaching too fast. Daniel moved first, stepping onto the porch. A beat-up green pickup truck pulled into the driveway, brakes squealing. The door opened, and a tall, lanky teenager jumped out. Evan Rourke, 17, with tousled sandy hair, a narrow frame, and nervous brown eyes that darted everywhere at once. He wore a faded hoodie, jeans, and boots too big for him. Evan was known around Redwood Falls as the kid who fixes anything he can get his hands on, a self-taught mechanic with a knack for engines and electronics. He was awkward, anxious, and soft-spoken, shaped by years of taking care of his alcoholic uncle after his own parents left town. Despite life's weight, Evan had a good heart. He waved frantically. "Officer Holt, you gotta hear this." Daniel stepped off the porch cautiously. "Evan, slow down. What's going on?" Evan shoved his hands into his pockets, pulling out a small recording device. "I was working late at the garage last night, and I heard Cole yelling on the phone in the alley. He said something about finishing what they started and getting the girl before the cops do. I didn't know what he meant at first, but then I saw your cruiser drive past." Daniel exchanged a heavy look with Sarah. "Did he say anything else?" Daniel asked. "Not much, but he mentioned cleaning out the Harland house, something about documents in a locked cabinet." Sarah swore softly. "If they're destroying evidence, we need to move quickly." Evan nervously rubbed his knuckles. "I can help. I'm good with locks and electronics." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "I'm aware." Before Daniel could decide what to do, Ranger barked sharply, tail stiffening. His gaze swept the tree line. Something, or someone, moved among the pines. Sarah whispered, "We're being watched." Daniel gathered Lily into his arms. "We leave now. Gail, stay behind my vehicle. Evan, if you want to help, follow in your truck and keep distance. If you see Cole, call us immediately." Evan swallowed but nodded. They loaded Lily and Ranger into the cruiser. Sarah took the passenger seat, hand resting near her holster. As Daniel started the engine, Gail placed a trembling hand on his window. "Bring her back safe, Daniel." "I will," he promised. The convoy rolled toward town. Ranger's gaze stayed glued to the forest, growling softly now and then. Sarah tapped her tablet, pulling up the Harlan property records. "There are only 2 outbuildings behind the house. If Cole left something behind, that's where he'd hide it." Daniel gripped the wheel. "We'll check both, then talk to Jonas." They drove in tense silence until they reached Redwood Falls outskirts. The atmosphere shifted, civilization creeping back in. Street signs, mailboxes, the faint smell of wood smoke from breakfast fires. But danger lingered like fog. When they approached the old Harlan residence, Daniel slowed. The house looked even colder in daylight. Empty, hostile, the yard still scarred by last night's cruelty. A locked shed stood near the fence, paint peeling, padlock old but sturdy. Evan pulled up behind them, stepping out with cautious optimism. "This lock's old. Shouldn't be too hard." Daniel nodded, but raised a hand. "Wait." Ranger sniffed the ground around the shed. His fur bristled. He circled twice, nose low, before looking up at Daniel with a sharp bark. Danger. "Stand back," Daniel ordered. Sarah moved first, her boot connecting with the door. It swung open. Inside were boxes, tools, a dusty mini fridge, and a hidden cabinet in the corner. Daniel approached. The cabinet was bolted shut, metal scratched as if someone had tried to pry it open in haste. Evan pointed. "I can open it." Daniel nodded. "Do it fast." Evan kneeled, tools moving with surprising skill. Within seconds, the cabinet clicked open. Inside was a folder marked Vehicle Logs, Harlan Case, along with torn medication labels matching the bottle seen in the recording. Sarah whispered, "He was hiding evidence." Daniel exhaled slowly. "And now we have it." Ranger barked again, toward the trees behind the shed. Sarah spun. "Someone's running." Daniel grabbed the files and bolted from the shed. But the woods swallowed the shape before he could identify it. Cole was close, too close. They had found the proof. But danger was already moving toward their next lead. Jonas, the homeless veteran. And Daniel knew instinctively, Jonas might be the next target. The sky above Redwood Falls thickened with clouds the color of bruised lavender by the time Daniel Holt, Sarah Maddox, Lily, Ranger, and Evan left the Harlan shed with a folder of crucial evidence. A damp wind brushed through the pines, carrying the metallic scent of an incoming storm. The woods behind them whispered with movement, subtle, almost taunting, reminding them that Cole Weaver had vanished into the trees only moments before. Daniel drove straight to the sheriff's station. His cruiser hummed steadily, a contrast to the tightness winding through his chest. Lily sat with Ranger pressed against her side, his presence steadying her tremors. Evan followed in his truck, hands shaking from adrenaline and fear, though he tried to hide it by clenching the steering wheel too hard. Inside the sheriff's station, fluorescent lights flickered weakly. Officers moved about their morning tasks, but the usual chatter was absent. Word had spread. Something big was unraveling around the Harlan case. As Daniel carried the evidence folder toward his office, the station door swung open, and a tall, imposing man entered. Chief Howard Brenner, 52, the head of Redwood Falls PD. Brenner was a barrel-chested man with a thick salt and pepper beard and steely eyes that rarely betrayed emotion. He wore the air of someone who had spent decades walking into chaos with an unshakable spine. A former Marine, Brenner carried a scar along his left jaw, earned overseas, but it was the death of his younger brother in a domestic violence incident that built his intolerance for abuse cases. He spotted Daniel immediately. "Holt, I heard you found something." Daniel handed him the folder. "And we may have a suspect destroying evidence." Brenner flipped through the documents, vehicle logs, tampered medication labels, and the notes found inside the shed. His eyebrows lowered into a dangerous frown. "We're moving fast. Good. Family court's hearing this afternoon. CPS wants testimony." Sarah added, "We also have a USB recording from Lily's father. You need to hear it." Brenner nodded. "In my office." As the recording played, Brenner's expression hardened. When Marcy's whisper, "Let him drink it," came through, his jaw clenched so hard that the scar on his face shifted. "That's enough." He exhaled sharply. "We're escalating this. I'll call Judge Marlowe." Judge Eleanor Marlowe, 58, was known across the county for her integrity. A tall, dignified woman with silver-streaked dark hair always tied in a neat bun. She possessed a sharp gaze that saw straight through lies. Her reputation stemmed from an early career tragedy. Her daughter survived an abuse case that the legal system nearly failed to prosecute. Ever since, Marlowe had become an unyielding protector of vulnerable children. When Brenner reached her by phone, she didn't hesitate. Bring the child, the audio file, the witnesses, and all evidence, she ordered. Courtroom 2 at 4 o'clock. Daniel closed his phone. We'll be there. By late afternoon, Redwood Falls Family Court loomed beneath clouds ready to burst. The courthouse, a stone building with tall windows and ivy crawling up its sides, looked both ancient and watchful. As Daniel carried Lily through the doors, Ranger walked close beside them, his steps deliberate, his head level with hers. Inside the lobby, voices echoed through marble hallways. One figure approached quickly. Paula Green, 41, the court liaison. Paula was a petite woman with a soft, round face, light hazel eyes, and short chestnut hair curled neatly under her ears. Despite her gentle demeanor, she had a reputation for being sharp and decisive in emergencies. Years working in overburdened districts had taught her to move fast, speak clearly, and care fiercely. She wore a gray blazer and carried a stack of folders under her arm. "Officer Holt?" she asked. "I've reviewed the initial report. We'll need Lily's statement, but only if she feels comfortable." Daniel nodded. "She's brave. She'll speak." Paula glanced kindly at Lily. "Sweetheart, I'll stay right by the door during your turn. You won't be alone." Lily managed a tiny nod. Sarah placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We're all right outside." As they moved into courtroom 2, tension tightened the air. Reporters, 2 from the local paper, 1 from a regional news channel, stood behind the railing, pens and cameras ready. The Harlan family seating area was already occupied by Marcy and Cole, both dressed to look innocent. Marcy wore a black dress and forced sorrowful eyes at every officer who passed. Her makeup was smudged just enough to appear tearful, an easy performance for a woman accustomed to manipulating sympathy. Cole wore a cheap suit, his hair combed but greasy, yet his eyes betrayed fury. His left knuckle had a fresh cut. He hid it inside his fist. The courtroom settled as Judge Marlowe entered, her robe swayed with the weight of authority. She surveyed the room before taking her seat. "Court is now in session," she announced, her voice steady. Attorney Rachel Keegan, 45, representing Marcy and Cole, stepped forward. Rachel was tall and sharply dressed, her blonde hair pinned into an immaculate twist. A high-powered defense attorney from Portland, she had a reputation for ruthless strategy. Her narrow blue eyes seemed perpetually calculating, and her crisp voice carried the confidence of someone used to winning. "Your Honor," she began, "my clients wish to assert that the police removed a child from her home unlawfully." Judge Marlowe cut her off. "Sit down, Ms. Keegan. You will speak after the evidence is presented." Rachel's jaw tightened as she stepped back. Paula Green opened the proceedings. "Your Honor, this case involves allegations of child abuse, psychological harm, and potential homicide involving the child's late father." Brenner stepped forward. "We have witnesses and physical evidence." The judge nodded. "Proceed." First called was Mrs. Gail Whitmore. She approached the stand, nervous hands clutching her purse. After being sworn in, she testified, voice trembling but unbroken, about seeing Marcy drag Lily across the yard and watching Cole pour water over the crying child. Rachel Keegan attempted to discredit her. "Mrs. Whitmore, are you prone to exaggeration due to your advanced age?" Gail's spine straightened. "I may be old, Ms. Keegan, but I know cruelty when I see it." The courtroom murmured. Next came Jonas Creek, the homeless veteran. Jonas arrived escorted by Brenner. He wore a patched jacket and carried a limp from an old injury. His face bore bruises, not from a fall but from the beating he'd suffered the day before. Jonas was blunt, honest to a fault, with soft brown eyes that held a lifetime of hardship. He took the stand. "I saw Lily dragged. I heard her crying. I should have done something earlier." His voice cracked. "I won't stay silent now." Daniel placed a steadying hand on his back as Jonas stepped down. Then Sarah presented the physical evidence found in the shed, torn medication labels and vehicle tampering logs. Brenner authenticated them. Finally, Daniel played the USB recording. Lily squeezed Ranger's fur as her father's frightened voice filled the courtroom. Marcy turned pale. Cole tensed. Rachel Keegan leapt to her feet. "Audio manipulation. This proves nothing." Judge Marlowe held up a hand. The court will verify metadata. Continue. Sarah gently touched Lily's shoulder. You ready? She whispered. Lily stepped forward. The room fell silent as she stood beside Ranger, who pressed against her leg, tail still, posture protective. Her voice was tiny but clear. They hurt me. They hurt Daddy. Ranger saved me. Officer Holt saved me. Judge Marlowe leaned forward, expression softening. Rachel Keegan moved to object, but Cole exploded before she could speak. That kid is lying. They're lying. The judge slammed her gavel. Order. Silence snapped across the courtroom. Judge Marlowe stood. Given the evidence, the credible testimony of witnesses, and the child's statement, this court issues an immediate protective order. Lily Harland is placed under the temporary guardianship of Officer Daniel Holt. Marcy Harland and Cole Weaver are to be detained pending criminal investigation for abuse, poisoning, and evidence tampering. Lily gasped. Daniel knelt beside her, his breath steady. You're safe now, sweetheart. It's over. Ranger nuzzled her cheek as tears spilled. Tears of release, not fear. And for the first time, light began to filter through the shadows of Redwood Falls. Snow began falling the moment Daniel Holt carried Lily out of family court. It started as a soft dusting, thin flakes drifting lazily through the gray sky, but soon thickened into a quiet storm that blanketed the parking lot and hushed the world. Ranger stayed close beside Lily, his breath puffing small clouds into the cold air, while Sarah Maddox held the car door open with one gloved hand. Daniel secured Lily in the back seat, tucked the blanket around her shoulders, then slid behind the wheel. He looked at her through the rearview mirror. You did incredibly brave today, sweetheart. Lily's voice came out fragile but proud. Daddy would want me to tell the truth. Ranger nudged her cheek. She smiled for the first time since morning. The drive back to the cabin carved a path through a town transformed by snow. Porch lights glowed warmly against the white blur. A few shopkeepers shoveled their storefronts, bundled in thick coats. It reminded Daniel of the Redwood Falls he grew up in, small, stubborn, resilient. A place where people built things with their hands and protected each other when the world grew harsh. Inside the cabin, the fire roared to life as Sarah added a log. Lily removed her boots, setting them neatly by the door, as if afraid to impose. Ranger shook snow from his fur, then trotted to her side as though resuming his post. The atmosphere inside, despite the warmth, buzzed with unfinished business. Sarah pulled up the county database on her tablet. Judge Marlowe wants us to establish a stable host environment for Lily until the long-term guardianship hearing. She glanced around the cabin. This place is good, but I think we can do better for her future. Daniel nodded. I've been thinking the same. The cabin is temporary. And that was when the idea, small, fragile, but full of hope, began to take shape. The next morning, sunlight glimmered over a landscape blanketed in white. Daniel bundled Lily in a puffy navy coat donated by the station's community closet. She looked like a tiny explorer wrapped in warmth. Ranger donned his winter vest, black nylon, reinforced seams, making him look twice as heroic. Their first stop was Elderwood Lane, a quiet street lined with cottages. They visited Dorothy Dot Wilson, the elderly neighbor whose testimony had helped secure the ruling. Dot answered the door in a knitted sweater with pastel flowers, her silver hair clipped back with pearl pins. She was short and soft-bodied, with a grandmotherly warmth that filled the doorway. A former textile worker widowed 20 years ago, Dot had spent most of her retirement sewing quilts for charity. Life had carved gentleness into her bones. "Oh, my stars," she gasped when she saw Lily. "You poor darling." She wrapped Lily in a gentle embrace that smelled of lavender and fresh linens. Ranger brushed his nose against Dot's hand, and she chuckled. "And who's this handsome boy?" Daniel explained the new plan he'd been forming in his mind. "I want to open a space for kids in crisis, a place where Lily and others can heal. The cabin is safe, but it's lonely. We need something bigger, something brighter." Dot's eyes glistened. "I'll sew curtains, warm ones, with color. Children need color." Lily hugged the old woman's waist. "Thank you, Miss Dot." Dot wiped her eyes discreetly. "You bring me the measurements, sweetheart." Their next visit was the riverbank under the Maple Bend Bridge, where Jonas Creek usually stayed. They found him sitting on an overturned crate, smoking a cheap cigarette, snow collecting in his beard. Jonas stood when he saw them, brushing ash from his jacket. His face, lined deeply from hard years, softened at Lily. "Hey, little bird," he murmured. Lily offered him a thermos. "We brought hot cocoa." Jonas blinked hard. "For me?" Daniel nodded. "We're building something, Jonas. A place for Lily and other kids. I need shelves, tables, maybe a reading nook. Thought you might want to help." Jonas stared at the snow for a moment, his boots scraping lightly against ice. "I don't have much to give." "You have skills," Daniel said firmly. "That's more than enough." Jonas looked at his shaking hands once strong, now worn, but something in Lily's eyes seemed to steady them. "Okay," he whispered. "I'll build whatever she needs." Back at the cabin, Sarah worked on transferring temporary ownership papers. She introduced Daniel to someone on a video call. Evelyn Rivera, 45, a social worker assigned to Lily's case. Evelyn was a tall biracial woman, Latina and Pacific Islander, wearing a burgundy blouse and rectangular glasses. Her curls framed her face in soft waves. Evelyn radiated calm authority, shaped by a career in foster care advocacy and her own childhood spent moving through unstable homes. "Officer Holt, Lily seems safer with you than anywhere else," she said, "but a stable environment is necessary for long-term care." "That's why we're building one," Daniel said. Evelyn smiled. "Then I'm on your side." All afternoon, neighbors arrived at the cabin after hearing whispers of Daniel's plan. One was Emily Carter, 27, a librarian with auburn hair and freckles like sun-kissed dust. Emily wore thick glasses, a wool coat, and carried a cardboard box filled with children's books. Her personality was warm and soft, shaped by years of volunteering with literacy programs. "These belong to the reading room at the library," she explained, "but I think Lily needs them more." Lily's eyes sparkled as she peeked inside. Ranger sniffed the books, tail wagging gently. Then Linda Johnson, the diner owner, arrived next. Linda was around 60, short and round, with gray curls tucked under a knitted beanie. Her voice was hearty, kind, worn by decades of running the only cafe open past 6 p.m. She brought a tray of sandwiches and steaming soup. "No child heals on an empty belly," she announced, setting the tray down. Next came Caleb Dunn, 55, the local hardware store owner. Tall and lanky with a salt and pepper ponytail, Caleb wore a thick flannel jacket and carried wooden beams across his shoulder. "Heard you need shelves," Caleb drawled. "Let's build some sturdy ones." Sarah muttered, "Word travels fast in this town." Daniel smiled. "That's Redwood Falls." One by one, neighbors filled the cabin with conversation, tools, blankets, books, food, and warmth. Ranger moved carefully between them, checking, sniffing, and nudging stray hands for affection. Lily watched, standing at the heart of it all, no longer trembling, no longer curling into herself. Her eyes brightened as if lit from the inside, awakened by the sight of people who wanted her, not because they had to, but because they chose to. By evening, Daniel led Lily to a room transformed by many hands. The walls were painted in soft sunrise shades, peach, gold, and pale lavender. Dot's newly sewn curtains fluttered faintly. A small pine bed Jonas had hammered together stood beside a nightstand built by Caleb. Emily's books filled the low shelves. Linda had tucked a jar of peppermint candies beside the lamp. The room felt like hope given shape. Lily stepped inside slowly. Daniel waited at the doorway, giving her space. Ranger padded toward her bed and sat beside it, tail thumping once. Lily whispered, "This is for me?" "All of it," Daniel said gently. "This is your room." She touched the blanket, then the wall, then the books. Softly, reverently. Finally she turned to him, eyes full, voice trembling. "Can I stay here forever?" Daniel knelt before her. "If you want, and if the court agrees, I'll fight for you, Lily, I promise." Ranger placed his paw gently on her knee, as if sealing the vow. Lily knelt, wrapping her arms around the dog's neck. Then she looked at Daniel with a new kind of trust, a trust earned, not inherited. Then, I want to call this home. And for the first time, Daniel believed a future brighter than the past had already begun to bloom. In the quiet corners of our lives, God often works in ways we cannot see. Sometimes his miracles arrive not as thunder or lightning, but as a gentle hand reaching out, a warm room on a cold night, or a brave soul willing to stand beside someone who has lost all hope. Just like Lily found safety in the arms of people who cared, we too may find God's grace through the kindness of those he places in our path. If this story touched your heart, remember this truth. No matter how dark a season may feel, God always sends light. Sometimes it comes through a loyal dog, a compassionate neighbor, or a stranger who simply refuses to look away. And in our everyday lives, we can be that light for someone else. One small act of love can be the miracle someone is praying for. If this story brought you warmth or strength, please share it with someone who might need it. Leave a comment to let us know how it touched you, and subscribe to the channel so more hearts can be lifted. May God bless you, protect your family, and guide your steps through every storm. And if you believe that God's light still shines in this world, type Amen in the comments.